He exhaled slowly, stopping mid-breath, and squeezed off a round. The pipper on his HUD indicated the point of impact for the projectile placed in the flat section of armor just below the Loki's left arm. In fractions of a second, the recoil of the gun buffeted the hammerhead's interior slightly. The mass the sabot round accelerated, slinging the projectile and pushing back the frame of the jump armor as it recoiled. The air cracked, the projectile closing the distance with nearly imperceptible quickness. It struck exactly where the pipper was placed, the reliable calculations of the fire control system determining down to the inch its point of impact. The round punched a neat hole in the side of the Loki, which moved with one great lurch. The Loki's movement had further exposed the side of the mobile armor, and Weber didn't hesitate to squeeze off a second shot, still holding his breath. The second round found a home further back on the armor's frame, punching through a flat section of plating that joined the Loki's slanted rear armor and the missile rack on the left shoulder. Bright blue, the flash of a reactor core containment failure sent a gout of hot plasma through the second sabot-sized hole. Before the reactor could shut itself down in an automatic scram, the systems set in place to quench nuclear fusion were compromised beyond repair. The breach of containment was too quick. The automatic attempt to minimize the damage to the armor and crew, to stop the runaway energy of a small sun, was futile. The Loki disappeared in a flash as the reactor cooked off. External cameras that granted the hammerhead its vision automatically picked up on the star-like brightness of the plasma jet, dimming their own apertures to prevent damage to the equipment. The screens that made up Weber's view of the outside world dimming temporarily. The explosion threw the camo netting off of the hammerhead. Swirling dust kicked up with the wind from the detonation. The hulking frame of the Loki fell backwards and away, pushed over by the direct jet of hot reactor discharge. Bang, Weber muttered under his breath, exhaling. The release of endorphins, the cathartic feedback of steel and man, shattered by the guns, flooded his brain. "Great shot, kid," Crow shouted into the radio. Crow cut the jump jet's power, descending back to the ground with a heavy thud, kicking up a cloud of dust as the Cyclops settled. Weber watched as he kicked off his lights and began to move to a rock outcropping to shield himself from the return fire he was sure was coming. Weber shifted his view to the closest Barracuda. The lengthy rectangular frame of the Barracuda, a blocky missile boat with legs, immediately began to unleash a barrage of missiles from the vertical launch tubes that occupied its lengthy torso. Doors flipped open in rapid succession from front to rear, bright orange mixing with the pure white of solid propellant, igniting the missiles kicked skyward from the tubes. Smoke trails streaked high into the air above the battlefield. The hammerhead's threat warning receiver identified the launches and activated, blaring its high-pitched electrical tone in Weber's ear, highlighting the launch direction of his situational awareness display. Weber kicked the foot pedals, driving the hammerhead backwards with purposeful strides, lumbering to life as it backed out of its defensive earthworks the battalion's combat engineers had erected. The missiles streaked earthwards, arcing from above, aimed directly at the hammerhead. They bared down on them with increasing speed, gravity pulling the heavy missiles down towards their target, rocket motors driving each projectile, demonic whips of chemical propulsion driving screaming warheads that sought their death with cold mechanical calculation. "Missile launch, 1 o'clock! Go get 'em, Matty!" Weber exclaimed. He freed himself from the restraint he had shown before as the hammerhead trod backwards, searching for his next target in the fire exchanged between the two groups of armors. Matty had already begun to deploy countermeasures, launching canisters of chaff and flares to confuse the incoming missiles, and deploying their own smokescreen to help break any line of sight the Barracuda could draw on them from its position.